The rules were simple. He would land the plane. He would strip you of your warm clothes. And then he would tell you to run. You could run into the woods. You could hide in the brush. You could try to survive the freezing Alaskan cold. But you couldn't leave. Because Robert Hansen wasn't just killing these women. He was hunting them. He was playing out a twisted fantasy of the most dangerous game in real life. And for 12 years, he never lost. Cindy Paulson knew she had one chance. She was handcuffed. She was barefoot. And the man with the gun was right behind her. She didn't know it yet, but her escape was about to expose a graveyard scattered across the Alaskan wilderness. She was the one anomaly in Robert Hansen's perfect record. The one prize that refused to be hunted to the people of Anchorage. Bob Hansen was the shy, stuttering man who ran the local bakery. He was a father, a husband, and a pillar of the community. But Bob had a secret hobby. He was a champion big game hunter. And when the bears and the wolves became too easy to catch, he decided to upgrade his prey to something more intelligent, something that could beg for its life. Alaska is the last frontier. It is a land of breathtaking beauty, but it is also a land of terrifying isolation. In the lower 48 states, if you run far enough, you hit a road. In Alaska, if you run, you just find more wilderness. In the 1970s, Anchorage was a boomtown. The oil pipeline was bringing in millions of dollars and thousands of strangers. It was a city of transients. People came to get rich, or they came to disappear. Robert Hansen used this landscape as a weapon. He was an apex predator who understood that in the bush, no one can hear you scream. He utilized a private plane to transport his victims from the red light district of Anchorage to the remote Knik River Valley, a place accessible only by air or boat. He turned the vast emptiness of the state into his own private killing field. Welcome to Hidden Killers. Today, we are documenting the crimes of the butcher baker. We aren't just looking at the murders. We are analyzing the hunt. We will look at the aviation maps he used to mark his kills, the survival horror his victims endured, and the incredible bravery of the 17-year-old girl who brought his plane down. Zip up your parka. We are going into the wild. To understand the specific horror of Robert Hansen's crimes, you must first understand the environment that created him. Anchorage, Alaska, in the 1970s and early 80s was not like any other city in America. It was the height of the Trans-Alaska pipeline construction boom. Billions of dollars were flowing into the state, and with that money came a tidal wave of humanity. Men came for the high-paying roughneck jobs, and where the men went, the sex industry followed. Anchorage became a chaotic, transient boomtown, a modern-day Wild West. The strip clubs on 4th Avenue were open all night. People arrived on Monday and vanished by Friday, and nobody asked questions. It was a society in constant flux, creating what criminologists call a permeable victim pool. Women, often runaways or sex workers, could disappear, and the police would simply assume they had moved back to the lower 48. But the most dangerous aspect of Anchorage wasn't the rough crowd. It was the geography. Surrounding this small island of civilization was millions of acres of aggressive, untamed wilderness. The Alaskan bush is dense, freezing, and unforgiving. Once you step off the pavement, you are off the grid. There are no surveillance cameras. There are no witnesses. For a serial killer, this geography offered the ultimate advantage. Disposal sites that would never be stumbled upon by a casual hiker. You needed a bush plane to access the deep wild. And Robert Hansen, a mild-mannered baker by day, was an expert pilot by night. He looked at the vast, empty map of Alaska and saw a playground where he could act out his darkest fantasies without fear of interruption. If you lived in Anchorage in 1980, you probably knew Bob Hansen. He was the owner of Hansen's Bakery, a popular spot known for its delicious donuts and pastries. He was a familiar face in the community, a married man with 2 children, a local business owner, and a guy who would often drop off free boxes of donuts at the police station. He was unassuming, short, skinny, with acne-scarred skin and a nervous stutter that made him seem harmless, even pitiable. But this harmless exterior was a carefully constructed mask. Inside, Hansen was seething with a deep-seated hatred for women. Born from a childhood of relentless bullying and rejection, behind the stutter, Hansen was a disciplined and lethal marksman. He wasn't just a weekend hobbyist. He was an elite big-game hunter. He held world records in the Pope and Young Club books for bow hunting. He had tracked and killed grizzly bears, wolves, and Dall sheep in some of the most rugged terrain on Earth. He thrived in the wilderness because it was the only place where he felt powerful. In the city, he was the stuttering baker. In the bush, he was the apex predator. But eventually, the animals stopped satisfying him. A bear doesn't beg. A wolf doesn't cry. He needed prey that could understand the stakes of the game. He needed prey that could feel fear. And so, the champion hunter decided to switch species. Hansen's hunting ground for sourcing his victims was the red light district of Anchorage. He targeted dancers and sex workers, women he viewed as disposable. His approach was practiced and predatory. He wouldn't grab them off the street screaming. Instead, he would use his harmless baker persona. He would offer them money for sex, or often, just money to pose for him. He claimed he was a photographer. He would lure them into his car or drive them back to his house when his family was away. Once they were isolated, the trap would snap shut. He would pull a gun, usually a .223 Remington or a Thompson contender pistol. The stutter would vanish. The nervousness would be replaced by a cold, commanding rage. He would handcuff them and drag them into his den. For many of his victims, the horror began in his basement. He had a soundproof room equipped with anchors in the floor. He would keep them there for hours or days, raping and torturing them. But for Hansen, this violence was just the prologue. It was the preparation. He wasn't just a sadist. He was a hunter. And a hunter needs a field. When he was done with the preliminary torture, he would tell them they were going for a ride. He would load them into his car and drive them to Merrill Field, a small local airport where his Piper Super Cub was waiting. This is the detail that elevates the Hansen case from a typical true crime story into a survival horror nightmare. Imagine the terror of the victims. You are handcuffed, bruised, and terrified. You are forced into the tiny back seat of a bush plane. As the plane lifts off, you see the lights of Anchorage getting smaller and smaller until they disappear completely. You are now thousands of feet in the air, being flown by your abductor into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. The noise of the engine is deafening. It drowns out any questions or pleas for mercy. Hansen would fly them north to the Knik River Valley. This area is a desolate, braided river system filled with gravel bars, glaciers, and dense alderbrush. It is accessible only by plane or airboat. There are no roads. There are no cabins. He would land the plane on rough gravel bars that only an expert pilot could navigate. When the wheels touched down and the engine cut, the silence of the wilderness would have been crushing. The victims were now miles from civilization, often dressed in heels or thin clothing, facing the freezing wind. They were completely dependent on the man with the gun. And that is exactly where he wanted them. Once on the ground, Hansen would initiate his twisted version of the most dangerous game. He would strip the women naked or leave them with minimal clothing to increase their vulnerability to the elements. Then, he would remove their restraints. He didn't just shoot them immediately. He told them to run. He gave them a head start. He wanted the chase. He wanted to see them scramble over the river rocks, tear through the thorny brush, and panic. After they had run for a bit, Hansen would grab his semi-automatic rifle off an Ruger Mini 14 and begin to track them. He treated it like sport. He knew the terrain intimately. He knew how to move silently through the alders. The victims, disoriented and freezing, were stumbling blindly. He would flank them. He would herd them toward the river or box them into a canyon. Sometimes he would hunt them for minutes, sometimes for hours. It was the ultimate power trip. He was playing God in a freezing hellscape of his own design. The terror these women must have felt is maximizing the human capacity for fear. They weren't just fighting a killer. They were fighting the cold, the terrain, and the hopelessness of their isolation. When the game was over, Hansen had to dispose of the evidence. He didn't carry shovels or heavy equipment. He used the landscape itself. He buried his victims in shallow graves along the riverbanks, often covering them with just a few inches of gravel and moss. He knew that the Knik River was dynamic. Glaciers melt, water levels rise, and the geography shifts. He counted on the river to wash away the remains or for wild animals to scatter them. But while he discarded the bodies, he kept the souls. Back in his home in Anchorage, hidden in the attic, Hansen kept a trophy collection. But it wasn't taxidermy. It was jewelry. He kept the necklaces, rings, and ID cards of the women he murdered. Most chillingly, he kept an aviation map tucked into his headboard. On this map, he marked the exact location of each body with a small handwritten X. He would retreat to his attic, look at the map, and handle the jewelry, reliving the hunt. He believed he had created the perfect system. The wilderness swallowed his crimes, and the city ignored his victims. He felt untouchable, but he made one critical mistake. He underestimated a teenager. In June 1983, Hansen picked up 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. He took her to his home, chained her up, and tortured her. But for reasons only he knew, he didn't fly her out that night. He waited until the morning. When he loaded her into his car to drive to the airfield, Cindy knew she was going to die. She was handcuffed in the back seat. She was barefoot. But she was also watching. Hansen made a tactical error. He stopped to load supplies into the plane. He turned his back for a second. Cindy didn't freeze. She kicked the car door open and sprinted. She ran barefoot across the gravel and onto the tarmac, waving her handcuffed hands and screaming. A truck driver, who was napping in his cab nearby, saw the terrified girl and opened his door. She dove in. Hansen chased her with a gun, but when he saw the witness, he panicked and fled. Cindy Paulson had done the impossible. She had escaped the hunter. She went straight to the police, shaking and traumatized, and told them everything. The bakery, the plane, the game. You would think this would be the end of Robert Hansen. But tragically, it wasn't. When police brought Hansen in for questioning, he was calm. He was the meek baker. He claimed Cindy was trying to extort him, that she was a troubled girl looking for a payout. He had an alibi from 2 friends, which he had manufactured. It was until a dedicated Alaska state trooper named Glenn Floth took a second look at the case files that the tide turned. Floth realized there were missing women matching Cindy's description. He contacted the FBI. Legendary profiler Robert Ressler built a profile of the killer. He would be a low self-esteem male, likely a stutterer, a skilled hunter, and an owner of a private plane. It was a perfect description of Robert Hansen. The profile gave Floth the ammunition he needed to get a search warrant. On October 27, 1983, police raided Hansen's home. They were looking for the gun used to threaten Cindy. What they found was a museum of death. Behind the insulation in the attic, they found the .223 rifle. They found the jewelry box containing the trophies of missing women. But the most damning piece of evidence was the aviation map found hidden in his headboard. There were 24 X marks scattered across the Knik River Valley and surrounding areas. When detectives confronted Hansen with the map and the jewelry, his meek baker mask finally crumbled. He knew it was over. In a plea deal to avoid a protracted trial and to give closure to the families, Hansen agreed to confess and, most importantly, to guide the police to the bodies. They put the serial killer in a helicopter and flew him back to his hunting grounds. From the air, the man who once played God pointed down at the earth and said, there's one there. And another one there. The excavation of the Knik River was a grim, freezing task. Guided by the killer, police recovered 12 bodies. Hansen confessed to 17 murders in total, though authorities suspect the true number could be 21 or higher. Some of the X marks yielded nothing. The wilderness had reclaimed the remains, washing them away or burying them under shifting silt. Robert Hansen was sentenced to 461 years in prison plus a life sentence. He died in 2014 at the age of 75. But the scars he left on Alaska remain. Robert Hansen proved that the line between civilization and savagery is razor thin. He took the fantasy of the most dangerous game and made it a terrifying reality. He turned the beautiful isolation of the last frontier into a prison without walls. For the families of the victims, the Knik River is no longer just a river. It is a graveyard. And somewhere in that vast, silent wilderness, under the moss and the ice, there may still be victims waiting to be found, hidden forever by the hunter's ultimate accomplice, nature itself. Robert Hansen is dead. He died in a hospital bed, far away from the wilderness he loved to dominate. But the landscape he used as a weapon is still there. The Knik River still flows. The glaciers still shift. He proved that the scariest part of a horror movie isn't the monster. It's the setting. He turned the breathtaking beauty of Alaska into an accomplice. And the most terrifying thought. We only found the bodies he pointed out. In a state with 663,000 square miles of wilderness, how many X's on the map are still waiting to be discovered? But remember this, he played the most dangerous game, and he lost. He lost because he underestimated a teenage girl who refused to be prey. I want to ask you a survival question. If you were dropped in the Alaskan bush with a head start, do you think you could have outsmarted an expert hunter? Or was Cindy Paulson's escape a one-in-a-million miracle? Tell me your survival strategy in the comments. If this deep dive into the wild kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button and subscribe. We have more maps to decode. Stay warm and stay together.